And welcome to the Reg open source community, or even if you're just open source curious. Today we're on OpenStack. We're going to tell you what it's about. Remember last time we had HP in the studio and we were talking about the problems of cloud lock-in, and we mentioned this a little bit. Well, if you decided this was, interesting enough, and there was enough to be said, that we ought to give it the full hour treatment, which is what we're going to do today. By the look of the number of sign-ups, then you think so as well, so hopefully we'll do that justice. Because today we are all about OpenStack, like the title says. So let's see what we're going to be talking about today. Well, it's quite simple. We're going to be talking about what it is, what you do with it, why you should do something with it. If it didn't exist, why would it be a good idea to invent it? And the right way to get involved with it, the one that's going to be most useful for you in your business, because as we've just been discussing this, actually, it's not just about keeping you interested, although hopefully it does keep you interested as well. So who's going to be discussing this today? Well, our HP representative, we said to HP, can you get us a really special open source geek? And they sent along Colin Ianson. Colin, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, you do. Well done, thank you.
Good, and it's Ianson. Right, Colin, what do you do at HP?
I'm a distinguished technologist, and I'm one of the technology leaders of the company, particularly in the cloud area, looking with our customers, our main customers, about what their business problems are and trying to find real solutions. So I'm a practitioner.
But you're really into this OpenStack thing, aren't you? But not really into it just enthusiastic, but it's a large part of your job now.
It's a large part of the time, but the most important piece is to make sure it has business value to our customers and isn't just a techie, academic, interesting project. Now,
what I enjoy is that you are a man with strong opinions about this. So I'm looking to get some of your strong opinions in the next hour, and maybe we'll get a response to it. And one of the people providing that response will be from Freeform Dynamics, Dale Vile. Dale, welcome back. Yeah. It only seems like yesterday we were in exactly this place discussing something else. You're a very versatile man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see how this one goes. As you said, there's some quite interesting debates going on in this.
You don't agree with everything that Colin says, do you?
No.
So we'll see how that goes.
Well, we want your questions about and your opinions about this as well. Now, you will see in the for those of you who haven't been on a Regcast before, or even those of you who have and who've just forgotten how to use a computer, well, just above our heads are the buttons, and the most important button is the one to ask the questions. So please do ask the questions, or if someone's saying something which you violently object to, or even slightly object to, let us know what that is, and we'll put that into the conversation as well. Because we've got an hour to discuss this sort of thing. There is a lot to get through, but there are also lots of interesting things that we can talk about. And we want to make sure that we're talking about the things that you're interested in while you're watching it. You can also download the deck. We've got a good graph today that I'm very enthusiastic about. And there's some links as well. And give us your feedback at the end. If you like us talking about this, then we'll do it again. And I just got to say there are plenty of people like Colin. There are not many people like Colin. But the people that are like Colin, we have access to, and we can put them in front of you. Get on with it. I'm sorry, Colin. Dale, tell us a little bit. Why do we get to this point where we are here today discussing OpenStack and cloud?
Well, OpenStack, we've been talking about private cloud, around this very table with various IT vendors for a couple of years now.
Sometimes it seems like we discuss very little else.
I know, it does feel that way, doesn't it? And it's interesting, and we've seen theoretical interest, we've seen some early adoption activity, we've seen it kind of creeping along.
Yeah.
But actually, this OpenStack thing has kind of exploded onto the scene, and suddenly it's got everyone interested that we're kind of a little bit not quite sure. Is this for me? Is this for us? So it's brilliant. It's sort of put the whole private hybrid cloud thing on the agenda at a very, very sort of techie street cred level, which is great. And
now, from the Reg readers here, these are some of the they've got the problem fragmentation, disjoint in a data center.
Exactly. So a lot of the stuff that we do in terms of research with the Reg, with the Reg readers, that everything comes back, or a lot of stuff comes back to the things that. The issue that things aren't as joined up as they should be, and that's really fundamentally one of the biggest rationales for cloud computing, which is take a bit more of a joined-up approach, looking across your network, storage, compute, and so on, putting the right kind of tooling in place so that you can actually do things a little bit more harmoniously. And so that's kind of the backdrop for the whole cloud discussion in general. And you just move on to the next slide. I don't think we're dwelling on this because we've covered this before. I mean, a lot of people say, okay, well, let's just jump into the public cloud, and there's lots of evangelists who would argue that throwing everything at Amazon or whoever, implicitly you've got harmony, everything hangs together when you're in that kind of environment. But that's not what we hear from Reg readers. They're interested in public cloud, but most Reg readers at the moment are telling us that they see it as a tactical part of the equation. It's great for solving particular problems, and yes, they need to work it into their plans and activities as they look forward. But actually, the pivot point for their IT remains the data center. So then that leads to the question: well, how do you actually cloudify the data center? And that's all these conversations that we've been having.
And these discussions we've been having. And one of the problems is that in trying to solve the problem of fragmentation, you then end up introducing a different type of fragmentation.
Yeah, that is absolutely the problem. We come across people with multiple public cloud offerings, and they've got a VMware environment, and they've got a Microsoft environment. They're doing a little bit of everything. So they're sort of solving micro-level fragmentation, but at the next level up, they're still ending up with different standards and different ways of actually managing things.
You're nodding, Colin. This is basically what you hear when you're out in public.
Very regularly, the need for consistency is one of the biggest things, because when you have a fragmented environment, even fragmented clouds environment, your interoperability, your ability to move workloads and everything else is taken away from you. So you need something that's going to give you that consistency. And it's certainly one of the big reasons that we were attracted as a company to look at OpenStack, because it gives us a set of rules and a standard architecture to work from for ourselves. And by adopting it ourselves and seeing others come on board, like IBM as well, endorsing the same approach, we believe it makes it really available then into the mainstream IT. It's going to take us some time to get in there and to bring it into that mainstream IT, but it's on the road as something that's going to give us a standardizing approach to the cloud type environments we've got.
The standards things they're always a very difficult, long journey, aren't they? One of the things that we've seen is that some of the proprietary public cloud vendors, they've been very aggressive at reducing price and at trying to create a level of comfort without introducing that standards discussion, very much a level of comfort for users. And they have picked up a decent amount of business, haven't they?
Absolutely. And they also very kindly publish their APIs and make them available, even so some of the APIs almost become de facto standards. But you have to be very careful there, because you've only got the might of one company investing towards that.
Yes.
Whereas if you come to OpenStack, you've got a whole community that's investing towards it. So you actually get a much faster growth. And I know OpenStack is immature compared to many of the other things that are out there today, especially if you look at VMware's vCloud capabilities. It's a long, long way ahead, much more mature. It's a much better product in totality. But when you've got a mass of developers that can sit behind OpenStack and drive it forward, then you've got something that is a real change agent in the environment.
How big is the mass of developers at this moment?
Well, it's somewhere around about 1,000 is the number always used, but there are a small number of companies who are making very big plays into it. So Rackspace, obviously, because of the history with them.
Yeah, so the history of this, basically, is it came out of Rackspace and NASA, isn't it?
Yes, so both of them had projects going on. It was difficult for them to justify how they could do it just in their own companies, so they were able to go out into an open source environment, and by coming out into an open source environment, they could then start to get people clustering around. Now, there were other OpenStack projects out there, but this is the one that the community has found more interesting to cluster around. If I looked at the developer numbers the other day, and I think it's 3 or 4 times more developers work in OpenStack than it does in any of the other open source cloud type projects of the same type of virtual machine manager class that we're talking about.
And so at the moment, it's not one of those sort of open source things that's kept by someone. It is really...
No, the foundation is doing a very good job, and it's great just to see the way that people are really willing to put in major investments in. Red Hat's investment in recent times has been really great, driving and pushing the community forward, and also their adoption as well, wholeheartedly, of OpenStack into their product lines in the future as they go forward, has been another great way that the community has grown.
To close this one, you've got that, and you've got this process going on, which we'll go into more, the process of developing and what's coming out of it. At the moment, one of the other trends that we keep talking about is the rise of the sort of shadow IT, for want of a better phrase, where a lot of the business that's being done here in sort of cloud adoption is being done outside the IT department without necessarily their control and without their strategic direction on it. So again, we're moving down. OpenStack's never going to be attractive to people in sort of in HR with a credit card.
Well, it depends how the technology is delivered. If it is delivered as a public cloud service, and you don't care when you go to a public cloud, you just get whatever you want as a service. If OpenStack is sat inside your service provider, there's OpenStack deployed in the world. So OpenStack is a technology at that moment. The issue of shadow IT is really a commercial problem.
It's a commercial thing.
It's related to people with their credit card and enterprises struggling with governance in their world to manage what's happening there. And of course, with OpenStack now giving a world that is a hybrid world, the same interfaces for different instances, the ability to move between them, hopefully there will be a lot more ability for IT departments to take control of what's happening, because they can act as a broker to both the inside world and the outside world, and hopefully instead of just individual departments going out with their credit card and buying, hopefully IT departments can broker that spend and actually get even better deals than what somebody with their credit card is getting.
So what we're saying is that what we might have then is a process where even if if the deal is done at a departmental level, it can still be done with an open, sort of like a Rackspace, for example, who would be OpenStack based. So you could still keep that strategic.
Yes, and procurement departments, of course, can then make choices about what provider to go and use. Whether it's Amazon, Rackspace, HP, they can choose what public cloud provider they want to go to. Now, of those, Rackspace and HP are OpenStack, so you've got the beginnings and foundations of interoperability in that area, whereas Amazon and its S3, I know, very prevalent interface, lots and lots of developers like it and everything else, but it is the proprietary piece that's out there compared to what is going to be the open ecosystem for developers to come into.
Got it. Right, and we're still, but the point is we're still talking about integration with the data center.
Yeah, I mean, on the shadow IT thing, just to add a dimension to that, I mean, there's two forms of shadow IT. One of them is where it's mostly focused higher up the stack than OpenStack is playing out, which is around software as a service. But there is another form of shadow IT where departments are actually commissioning third parties, SIs and agencies and so on, if it's a marketing context. And I do think there's an opportunity to actually define some standards and say, okay, we don't mind you actually working with not that they're always going to ask your permission, but if you are going to work with third parties, here's some ground rules for doing that. And if you can work with someone who's got a foundation that we recognise, we can make sure that you're not going to run into all the kind of integration problems that shadow IT invariably runs into at some point. So
yes,
there is a big potential benefit there.
So look, there's a question already basically saying, as I think a large number of the audience, a large proportion of the audience will say, is that we've got some stuff going on. As Varun here is saying, is Azure and and sort of Amazon as well. And where does OpenStack sort of fit in on this? And we're going to go into some detail where it fit in. But the idea is basically you can fit it in.
Yes. You can. Obviously, if you're in a proprietary environment, it's going to be a little more difficult. It does require those vendors to work to the open interfaces.
Yeah, you're relying very much on them to see if they're going to be good citizens in the future for this. But we'll work into some detail about how the process of using OpenStack within, and how commercial, well, specifically HP in this case, but how sort of...
And we'll show some examples of how our roadmap has developed.
Yeah. But one of the things about the OpenStack community is, I mean, there are people doing all kinds of different things. There is a project, I seem to remember, that actually provides AWS-style APIs into your OpenStack resources.
That's great.
So if you have an existing investment in Amazon, then fine. You can, if you want to bring something from Amazon in-house or put it with Rackspace or HP or someone else, but you don't want to disrupt the app, then fine, no problem at all. Interfaces are there. That's the beauty of doing it in the open source way, because you do have people dealing with these edge cases.
Yes, and being open source, somebody's going to write that adapter and make it available. I believe it is available in the standard code already.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, now look at this, Del. This is what Reg Readers have said they want in the cloud platform. They value in the cloud platform. Yes.
Yeah. So if you're going to build a cloud platform in house, what does it? What boxes do you need to tick? And basically, the origin of this chart is we ran a research project a few months ago, and in preparation for it, we went around to HP, VMware, Microsoft, IBM, the usual suspects. We distilled out all the things that they were saying should be in a cloud platform, and we just listed them to Reg Readers, and we said, well, how important do you think they are? And this is the stuff that kind of popped out the other end in terms of things that Reg Readers care about. So, there are some things that were rejected, things like, giving end users self-service capability. That was a big, not ready for that. Within the IT department, yes, but not necessarily outside of that. And, if your chargeback was not something that people were that red hot about. Showback, keeping account of everything and just keeping score, fine. So, but this is the stuff that came through. So, and it's a good sort of lead in to the OpenStack discussion in terms of what OpenStack's for, really.
Yeah.
If we look at this, most of the stuff that OpenStack is concerned with is on the left-hand side.
It is on the left, right? Hardware abstraction going round, yeah.
So OpenStack, I think of OpenStack as kind of starting with the core and working outwards, and it's becoming more sophisticated. It's dealing with the sort of higher level problems as time goes on. But it started with the fundamentals, things like virtualizing your infrastructure and moving across server, storage, networking, different forms of storage and so on. And dealing with essentials like authentication and access and those kind of things. But also there's some management stuff in there. Horizon, I think, is the project. Is that right?
Yeah, for the user interface.
Yeah,
I'm going to get you to list the projects in a minute. I know you don't like doing that, but I'm going to make you do it, because you have to do it. It goes with the territory. In a minute, we'll let Dale describe describe his slide first.
And as we get more towards the right-hand side, we're getting into some areas that are probably futures for OpenStack, or maybe it deals with some of these in a rudimentary kind of way at the moment. But ultimately, this is where Reg Readers tell us they want to be. So OpenStack's really tackling the core of some of this stuff.
And on the right-hand side, then, individual vendors can add on stuff to OpenStack to make it so that today it's ready to go for people. That's the...
Yeah, and it's probably worth saying at this stage, we had this discussion earlier on, one of the big things about OpenStack is that there's a whole load of code, which is great, and it does some really funky stuff, but actually everything sits behind a set of APIs that in themselves define how components will talk to each other and collaborate to get something done. What that means is that if anything else comes along, provided it uses the same APIs, you can start substituting the native open source OpenStack components with some other, with whatever you want, basically. And at the same time, there's a whole bunch of adapters and connectors which allow you to actually bridge from the OpenStack environment into your existing investments. So coming back to that question earlier on, that's an example of that we mentioned. But it could be your storage arrays, your existing management tools around compute and so on. So the idea of OpenStack is to be open, funnily enough, and allow you to mix and match.
This is why we pay you the big money.
Now list to come up with this stuff too.
You should write a report about that. No, I take your point. But so what we have is a potential world where there are some mature open components, or you could use some that would be more vendor specific, depending on what you're wanting, but in a much more pick and mix way. Is that?
Yeah, you certainly get a lot more capability to bring in a multi-vendor hybrid type of world underneath that you're using, and also above, in terms of what the applications sit and run on top of. So you're opening up the space for innovation, mainly, of course, at the application level above.
Yeah.
But you're opening also places for innovation even underneath as well, with the different types of plugins, software-defined networking and other technologies coming in, but all made available to the applications through the standard API at the top. So you're getting the same thing. So the app guys designed down to an API. Then you can be innovative with the infrastructure underneath. You build your plugins as you need.
Good. Now, Colin, do some housekeeping for me and tell me, what is the state of OpenStack today as we broadcast right now? What's there?
OpenStack's 3 years old, approximately, and releases come every 6 months.
Question on that one. Are the 6-month releases, are they stable enough to go and implement?
We're happy to have been implementing them. We've implemented both we have implemented with Grizzly, and we're working towards Havana ourselves at the present moment. So they are coming, and we're quite comfortable with them. But we do have to do work in-house to make them enterprise ready ourselves. And we'll come a little bit later to talk about our Cloud OS, which is where we stabilise it completely for use in our own internal projects.
But you don't have to go back to the previous one to have something that you can start messing around with.
We look after that internally ourselves.
Good. And and what do we have in
What do we have? So we've already talked about the basic components. So the basic compute component, a virtualized compute component, storage components as block storage and object storage. The object storage being a really interesting new capability brought into the environment, and lots of people are really beginning to understand how to use object storage instead of block storage. There's the networking. And the networking project, of course, everybody knows it by the name Quantum. Quantum, yeah. Everybody knows the name Quantum, but of course we do know it has to be renamed. And looking quickly at my notes, it's now called Neutron.
Neutron.
Just to make sure we deal with some commercial issues around that. So remember, it's Neutron now, not Quantum.
Not Quantum.
Then there is authentication, Keystone. Now, did I miss anything important? I've done storage. Yes, I've done the 4 components. In addition to that, there's the dashboard, Horizon, and then there is a whole set of other projects around it. For example, domain name server as a service project, a Hadoop project out there. And these are all pieces that grow and add to the OpenStack family. But the best one and the most nicely named project at the present moment is Ironic.
Ironic?
Ironic.
It's spelled ironic as like ironic. It's not spelled ironic Q.
No, it's properly spelled ironic. And that is to allow you to have physical infrastructure in the world.
Oh,
so
I
everybody
see.
in OpenStack have gone virtual.
See what they
so
did there.
Ironic comes physical. And we'll talk a little bit later about the importance of things like cartridge-based computing. May well reintroduce a physical component into an OpenStack world that would work just like any other piece of compute, in inverted commas.
See, and we go, oh, how ironic.
Yes.
Yes, exactly, that's how. Crazy names, you open source guys. There are some crazy names on this, aren't there? I mean, the names are not terribly descriptive, it has to be said.
Yes, I think that's a big problem. And certainly, in talking to business leaders and people in their companies, they just get fed up with the list of project names, and they'd much rather you did exactly the same as we did earlier, just list them as functions.
The thing that does this and the thing that does that.
Much easier that way.
Yeah.
I feel much more comfortable with those descriptions. I always forget project names.
Yeah, it's better to have what it does rather than what its names. Now, all of these things, they've all got the communities working on all of them. They're all held in common.
Yeah, and obviously people who are keen and passionate about each one and have skills and competence in each one is working on them. So now the community is self-organising itself in a competence-based model.
Yeah.
Now, obviously some projects go faster than others because as soon as you get a major interest commercially, commercial companies will drive that piece of it. But, it really is a world in which innovators can come in as well as the big guys.
And the license under which this is done
It's an Apache license, so open in the common sense that we see most of our open source out there.
Okay, that's good. Does HP do a lot of contribution to this?
HP is one of the top 5 contributors. We go up and down a little bit depending on who's new kid
what
to the
else you got to do that week?
Yes. But one of the big 5 contributors, board members, and steering various pieces of the work.
Great. Okay, now are there any? One final question on this: are there any bits that are sort of lagging? Are the bit there are things that you really want to see introduced that it really needs? Or are you pretty happy with the way it's being developed so far?
Actually, there's so much coming at us; it's hard to know what's lagging behind. You know? you've got enough of a waterfall coming at you.
Yeah.
To cope with that is enough, and particularly, this is for our enterprise customers, our service provider customers. We've got to keep this as something they're capable of swallowing.
Yeah. Early adoption has been very much in the service provider community, has it?
Very much so, yes. It is identified by all the analysts, Citigroup, etc., who have seen that piece adopting it. But it's interesting, we do see other places of adoption coming up as well. There are the special one-off cases like PayPal, but that's a one-off case of a big customer coming forward. But what we do see is lots of people bringing it into their R&D environments. In particular, financial institutions are beginning to say, look, I've got thousands of developers, I'm paying a large sum of money for a virtual machine manager product out there. OpenStack is essentially free to me, and they are beginning to now bring it in, starting up their skunkworks type projects and coming online with that as well. So we're seeing it at the beginning of the development cycle coming into the world.
Okay, that's great. Well, let's have a look. Now, this is the graph of which I spoke, which I enjoy very much, and thank you for providing it. Please tell us all what's on it.
So it's amazing what you can do with a few straight lines and a Gaussian distribution, isn't it?
That's a Gaussian distribution.
It's sort of a Gaussian, right.
I was looking at it and I was
normal distribution, isn't it, over there? Sorry, yeah. So the graph talks about the idea that today we have technology developing at a particular pace. It is the mainstream of technology. And the performance required of it is gently increasing. As the technology evolves, it increases and goes up. And so it's just on a gentle curve. That's standard, what we build, what we know. You can predict tomorrow because you know sort of how we came from yesterday. It's the standard proprietary roadmaps that we see out there in our products. That meets probably the bulk of the need that's out there. Okay, there'll be some failings. People are still innovating new ideas, VMware, Microsoft, Red Hat, etc. Innovating and bringing new capabilities
in a smooth process of innovation and product release and things like that. And as you can see from this, it's always providing, the innovation is always satisfying the low end of the market.
Yep, they can meet the low end of the market, and one day they will actually meet the high end of the market, and the whole market will be commoditized at that moment. But sitting out there is the new kid on the block. And the new kid on the block comes from the foundations caused by NASA originally and through Rackspace that says, hey, if we could get an open source project with thousands of developers, okay, it starts as vastly immature, barely meeting any of the requirements. Could that army of people, given the knowledge of the things that are good about the current products and the things that are interesting but not key in those current products, could they build a whole new environment, understanding now the requirements in current time, not a few years ago, and really accelerate? And that's where the disruptive innovation comes that sits behind OpenStack. Now, today, we've come over the line, we can start to service some of the mainstream need. And we're starting into the very commodity parts of that mainstream need. Public clouds is a very good example of just basic capability that you want at the lowest commodity price.
That's really what you can do with it.
Yeah. So that's good. We're on that path. But as OpenStack starts to grow and the other projects start to add in, the capability grows and grows and grows. And eventually it starts to overtake the existing technologies and will start to commoditize chunks of the marketplace. As it commoditizes them, the existing vendors become more and more important for their high value add skills, the pieces where they are brilliant at certain aspects and certain things. So they're going to move from being virtual machine manager providers, because that's what OpenStack is going to come and do, more into adding the value-added services of running a highly featured cloud capability. And that's where you see some of their products going already. You can see the real nice advancing things like VMware's vCloud, moving up nicely up the stack now, coming into those areas.
So we're today looking at that A, B and C. We're past A, because before A, then really the only reason to be involved with OpenStack is because you like doing this.
Academic interest.
So then after A, then you can start using it for some stuff. Some basic stuff.
So B is sort of where we are at the present moment. So we're on the journey, and obviously for many enterprises, they've got to work out, is this thing safe?
Yeah.
Can I trust this thing? Can I bring it into my environment? Is it enterprise class? And that, I believe, is where the role of key IT companies, ourselves, IBM, Red Hat, have taken a real role to try and say, let's industrialize this, let's get it so that you can bring it up to a trusted point, like Linux was brought up from an interesting project into something we trust absolutely in our mainstream now. So that drive is having a great impact on, can I bring this into my IT environments? And it's maturing as well at that moment as well. So the whole idea of when I go and look for the flavour of a virtual machine, is it the flavour of some agnostic virtual machine sat in there? Or could I actually go and say, hey, the flavour I'd like is a particular ESX class at this moment in time with particular features available to me? That can be done. That's as we now start to mature, bring this whole thing into an enterprise class for our major customers.
Dale?
How much of that, just a question really, how much of this sort of enterprise hardening, let's say for want of a better phrase, is about the software per se, and how much of it is about the delivery, would you say?
For us, it certainly started with the code. We had to take the early releases of the code and to get them to a point where we could trust them for our public cloud. As we took them up to our public cloud, obviously the issues came about things like plugins, putting plugins then onto our own equipment that were sort of in that starting phase. But to operate is another set of questions, and those operate questions are not quite the same traditional questions as we have today, because once you get to an OpenStack world, you're going to find it very difficult to silo your operations around servers, storage and networking. You will still have specialized skills and competences in there, but you're now thinking of the whole of the compute capability, infrastructure as a service, delivered as one. So operations world is certainly changing out there, and that's the one that we're all learning to do. And of course, because we run a public cloud ourselves, we are in the absolute fire of learning how to do that.
Yeah. Where I was going with that was if we take a service provider or a big bank that has a lot of resource to throw at skunkworks projects, they can sit there and they can work with the huge number of options in Nova, for example. Just choose one project, and they can actually work out what's important to them, and they can prioritise. They can set up their own configuration, best practice, and so on. Most working IT departments don't have that kind of luxury, do they?
I get it, and I struggle with the problem associated with it, because yes, you could do this, you can set up the support for it, and it's great in year one, while the guys who are really enthusiastic about doing this are still sat and employed by you. When they move on in 2 years' time, supporting your OpenStack distribution becomes a nightmare of a problem. And supporting OpenStack distributions is going to be one of the key steps we're going to see in the next few years. And you'll see, we'll talk about something called Cloud OS, which is how we stabilize the distribution inside our own world. And others will have their own particular approaches, but you've got to be able to hang on to those 6-month drops on a regular basis and know how to handle it. So there is, you're completely right, there's a new operational question to work with.
A real investment of, there has to be some kind of organised investment of time to be able to keep this.
Yeah, you may get it you may do it yourself, you may get it from other parties, and that part of the market will mature.
There's, on this, if you take a slice at any time, through at any time on this, then the progress, the performance that you get from the disruptive, until you get right to the end, the performance you get from the disruptive innovation is less.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get hybrid type environments.
Yeah.
You get high performance, high quality environments alongside the commodity. So slowly the commodity world grows and grows and grows and chews away at the specialist world that's sitting up there. But there will still be pieces that OpenStack will not come up and address. There's still going to be particular requirements that people are going to bring up. You might say super hyper paranoid deployments or something, but even them, they are possible to bring in, but you may need special attention into how you build your plugins at that moment, so there will be the need of specialization. So maybe sometimes you will stay with proprietary virtual machine management environments, and maybe sometimes the tools that those guys are migrating into, their super clouds, they will just turn around and go, supporting my own virtual machine management is just not really a great idea anymore. I'll I'll go and use, I'll point to what the community has and use that and not have to support my own anymore. That's speculation for the future.
Because what we have on this, there's an implicit cost. And that includes sort of opportunity cost and everything like that, sort of a total economic cost axis that isn't here.
Yes.
And so you say, so it's worth dropping down on the on the performance thing if the total economic cost makes it a viable proposition.
The total economic cost and trust.
And trust.
You've got to have trust in there as well.
Yeah. The proprietary guys have been pushing. They know this. They've been driving costs down at the moment, which has meant that there is less of a perceived advantage either now or in the future, if you're going to model this right into the future, for going with open source rather than trusting that eventually those proprietary environments will become more open.
I can't speak for the proprietary guys. I'm not one of them.
No.
I don't. But you can see that they are, in the way they build their portfolios, they are moving up the value chain. Mm-hmm. They're beginning to open this space at the bottom. I can't remember how many years it is now since VMware made ESX available free of charge. They've seen the lights and they understand, and they're taking quite a leadership position.
Yeah, I think. From my point of view, I don't think it's the fact that it's open source per se that matters. It's an open source project that has a huge amount of buy-in, and when you look at cost, the cost of software, as we know, is generally not the biggest deal in the greater scheme of things. When you sort of zoom out, the things that hold people back are skills, integration costs, and those kind of things, and that's why, they're just slicing things in a slightly different way when you talk to a Microsoft or an Oracle or these kind of guys, because they're looking for vertical integration and they're getting economies up and down the stack. Here we're trying to drive economies, I guess, more horizontally, if that makes sense. And they're not mutually exclusive. They need to be mutually exclusive, provided you've got the kind of buy-in from the commercial vendors as well,
That's the key point.
Exactly.
They're not exclusive. Towers can exist, scale out can exist, and they can use, and actually scale out can help towers in the world. But trying to say the whole world is going to be changed to an OpenStack type world, too hard to believe. There are too many things well embedded. COBOL code still exists. We have to be realistic about how far you're going to get.
Mm-hmm. Let's have a look at in the last third of what we're going to do today. Let's have a look at how this is going to work in the commercial environment. This was originally your slide, was it, Dale?
Yeah, all it's really saying is what we've just been talking about, which is that OpenStack provides a good foundation or core of functionality, which everyone agrees on.
Yes.
And the point of that is that everything then becomes interoperable and portable. Mm-hmm. I'm generalizing, obviously. And then there is still a need for specialization. There is still a need for enrichment. And that's where vendors have the ability to still make money. But I think the point is there isn't an excuse anymore to start reinventing the wheel or stick with your proprietary wheel for things that pretty much all of your competitors are, switching to in this case, OpenStack standard way of doing things. Mm-hmm. So that's the main point here in terms of we've got that hub of agreement, if you like, in the industry.
When we monitor the health of any open source project, you always look who's involved and who's contributing and things like this. Now, on the inside, on the people who are very active in this, and obviously we go back to the beginnings with Rackspace, so that goes without saying. Red Hat have been very active. You've been very active. IBM have been very active. IBM went and bought something that wasn't OpenStack, didn't they? What's there? CloudStack or something like that.
No, I think that's CloudStack is Citrix, isn't it? Yeah. That's the Citrix's CloudStack is actually a alternative open source project running at the moment as well.
Source project is right.
Yeah, that was the old. Well, is it still a rival? I'm not seeing it.
It's still gets developers attached to it.
Yeah,
there's three times.
It doesn't have that same. Doesn't have the same.
I think
but what I'm saying is, people are very sensitive as to who's involved and how much effort they're putting into it. At the moment, you're okay with the amount of energy that there is in there, are you?
Absolutely, and as I say, we're one of the top 5 contributors out there. Yeah. And if you look at the size of the project, because you have to compare OpenStack with other projects, there are Linux, KVM, and WebKit are the largest open source projects running, and OpenStack is the next one down on the list. So in terms of the community, and we know that OpenStack clusters around the big projects, and these are the ones that really get open source gets driven forward by the big projects. We know this is one of the big projects, and we can have reasonable trust and faith this thing's going to go forward. People have asked the question, is OpenStack too big to fail? Things could still come well and truly unstitched on us, but the momentum is there. The big names have signed up to it. Customers are beginning to adopt, and when we start to use it, and I think the real crunch is when you start to use it in your products, you actually move ahead and you start to speed up. So you start to get development efficiencies yourself in your own world.
I think the point is it's real, Tim. I mean, we go around, we hear stories from vendors all the time, and you get things popping up, and everyone says, "Yeah, we're into that as well," and everyone sort of ticks the boxes. Hadoop was, one recently, but when you look at the commitment and the resources going into OpenStack versus Hadoop, for instance, it's a huge difference. Not trying to trivialise Hadoop. There's some good stuff going on there.
Yeah.
But this is much more solid in terms of industry commitment.
So, of course, Savannah.
Yep.
Is the OpenStack Hadoop project. So OpenStack is bringing in Hadoop as an application inside the world already.
And I think it acts as a catalyst, and it acts as a catalyst not just within the open source community, but it acts as a catalyst, as we were saying, in the commercial world as well, because it's driving people to think more smartly about what are you bringing to the party, and actually bringing differentiated specialisations.
So the differentiated specialisations is vendor enrichment sort of thing. I mean, for instance, there's a real specific sort of question that we've got sort of here. This OpenStack. Will OpenStack address virtual machine failover and replication? Sort of things that these sort of things that we're really getting into now with the sort of cloud operating systems.
Yes, so that will be included inside how you put your implementation. On the API, you may not see it, but inside it's got to be provided on this basis. So when we HP deliver public cloud based on OpenStack, we give a service level agreement of 99.95% availability on that already. So that means we have to have failover at that moment of the workloads inside the environment. So yes, it's there, and provably there from what's in the public domain already.
Okay, so there's a question here about it's a Red Hat thing. What's the rationale behind bundling OpenStack with Red Hat? So with Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7. What's the rationale behind that?
Oh, I can't comment for how Red Hat are running their strategy, but I know that they are open-heartedly moving forward into using OpenStack. I don't know how it fits with Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization.
You have to ask Red Hat.
No, have to ask Red Hat.
Yeah, I'm just asking you because you're the only person in the studio. We don't have anyone from Red Hat. I know that people from Red Hat love Regcast. So if you're watching at the moment and you want to comment, then you can say it there and it will come out here, and then I'll say it as if I'm you. And but yeah. You could do that. So now let's have a look in the time that we've got left. Let's have a look at exactly what HP's building around this, because I mean it's apart from the fact that that's partly why you're here, but it's also a really good example of how this is going to become a commercially a commercially essential product. So here's your Cloud OS 1.0 diagram. Now, I can never read these things with blocks in. I never understand them. So
it's all right. I struggle with them as well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the background of this. We announced Cloud OS approximately 2 weeks ago, announced it to the world, and said that this is the way that we're going to use OpenStack as a reusable component inside our own world. And so this is going to turn up in multiple of our products, in our cloud products, and in other places potentially turning up as well. And this is the way that we're going to maintain it. Now, it's built actually out of two pieces, the execution side and the administration side, just as you would hope and expect, sits on sort of the infrastructure. The plugins, of course, are plugins to our infrastructure. Possible to change, yes, if you've got other infrastructure. The kernel, just like any operating system kernel, comes from the open source world, in this case.
I was recognising the product names.
The product names are there. So the ability to authenticate yourself, the ability to manage images in Glance, compute in Nova, block storage in Cinder, and it still says Quantum because this slide was actually written before the words changed to Neutron. So we try to keep up, but PowerPoint architecture sometimes gets left behind.
Than open source
absolutely. And there is a Swift component to come in there as well over the next period of time. But that is the standard OpenStack as industrialized by ourselves. We need to add to it what we call base. That base gives us a service framework. And there are more than three, but there are three primary pieces inside there. The first one is our ability to understand resources. So where are the different types of resources? So if we're going to run a hybrid type of environment, we know where to find those resources and where they're available. The next one is OpenStack is really about building an instance of a virtual machine, an instance of something. So we've used for many years very successfully the idea of templates, where you bring together the storage, networking, and the servers, and potentially even the application themselves as a template build. So a standard LAMP stack build, something we've done for the last 3 years as part of our cloud offerings. So templates are very important, and we see the value for them in helping industrialize the use of cloud and making as a service much easier to use. And the last bit is just a document library in which all the documents that tell you about the system are retained and kept consistently in one place. So instead of scattered everywhere, like data gets scattered everywhere in type systems, and now you move to the type of world that OpenStack is, they're now in documents, you know where to find them, we kept them in the same place. So that's the basic core for execution. Then on the left-hand side, the self-service dashboard is based on Horizon, but we obviously put some enhancements into that to get what we need.
Horizon is the OpenStack.
Horizon's the OpenStack, yeah, sorry. Mustn't having condemned the project names myself, I've now got to be really good at using them.
It's all in the end.
Okay, and then the other important thing is there's an operations dashboard underneath it. But the bottom piece on the left is the key part of the industrialization that you need, because as part of our administration, there is an installer and also the ability to patch and upgrade the environment. So that is what we give, that's what we make for ourselves inside our own projects at the present moment. And if anybody's interested, if they go to our website, it's it's an HP website that ends in Cloud OS. I'm sure you can Google it.
I think we might have the link.
Yeah, you may have the link
actually,
there.
yeah.
You can find and ask for ability to use our sandbox. And come in and actually play with it. The sandbox we announced 2 weeks ago. We're just collecting names at the present moment for that. But if you want to come and play, you know, we are at the starting point on that. We're probably going to be inundated with the number of people who want to come and play. But yeah, we've made the public offer. So there it is. Hundreds of thousands.
Once this goes viral, there'll be hundreds of thousands. But the serious thing is to get enough people playing with it and using it. You need to make it possible that this is, there's not a week's worth of time you have to put in to get.
And there's a real proof point.
Yeah.
If you stick a sandbox out there in front of the community, trust can build.
Yes.
That makes a big difference.
That's a very serious point as well, isn't it? Yeah. So now let's have a look at what you're calling HP Cloud Systems. This is your history. This is
our history of how we've used OpenStack so far. So
yeah.
Cloud OS is where we are today. We've got there through a path.
Yeah.
And that path, 3 years ago, we built our own boxes. They were our own proprietary solutions for cloud. Cloud in a box name comes up occasionally with our cloud system matrix. There's 1,000 of them deployed in the world with clients at the present moment. So it's been very successful. But we realized in trying to work into a hybrid world, we were going to have challenges.
Yeah.
And that's the first stage for us was just simply adopting the OpenStack API as the ability to burst into other places. Now, we built proprietary interfaces for some of our partners, like Savis, but OpenStack gives us a way to burst into now the public cloud, and HP Public Cloud was, of course, our first bursting target for OpenStack. Now, once you've built that, which we've had around for about a year, in your hand as an interface, then you can start to do lots more things in the environment. So you can start to see, which comes up on the right-hand side, the idea that we can do cloud-to-cloud bursting in private environments. So you can have two of our cloud system matrix sat side by side, and you can burst one into the other. We actually set up all of our support by KVM by setting it up as an OpenStack appliance. So you burst into your OpenStack appliance. Equally, not only can you have two clouds in your own environment connected by OpenStack, but you could have another one hosted by somebody else. So you could have a managed cloud where you have what's important to you inside your own building or inside your own data centers, and then the ability to burst out to another one that's held in another facility, perhaps operated, for example, by ourselves, where we get economies of scale in how we operate that one externally because we're operating lots and lots and lots, but you have a lower point of trust in it. So you say, this is for my development workloads, this is for my immediate crisis new products and everything else. So you get a new place to come to, and of course there comes different pricing strategies you can apply to that as a deployment. Instead of having to own everything yourself, you can actually come to a different point. So OpenStack is really helping us drive our portfolio forward, and Cloud OS forms really the next piece of that story.
And how much have you had to develop proprietary code or your own solutions to sort of embrace the cloud-to-cloud type concept, the federation concept? The
federation, so multiple clouds, or our language is hybrid cloud.
Hybrid cloud, yeah.
With the idea of there is a controller and a whole set of providers underneath. So our controller provider model understands the OpenStack interface and works to it. And in other work that we're doing around cloud sort of network functions virtualization, we're using again OpenStack interfaces in that world. So again, the use of it as an intermediate interface. And we discussed earlier, is OpenStack important for the components that's inside it, or is the API of equal importance? And in trying to build in systems, and you can see because we're third generation into our systems, that interface becomes absolutely critical in what we can do to make integration easier. Now, yes, you've still got to get everybody through that piece of first learning of here's a new API to learn, and what do I do and how does it work, and what's the model sat underneath it. That's a challenge, I get that, but once we're over that, then we get the synergy, and I think it shows up in the developer ecosystem out there, the number of developers who felt very confident to step into building their products on top of an OpenStack environment. So the controller provider model works very well, and that's one that sort of opens the door very well. But yeah, we've had to do some work as well to get into that.
Do some questions, Colin, while we're on this one. There's a few questions come up. How much of the your industrialization of this, how much are you going to contribute back to the...
I think that the bulk of it is being contributed back, because otherwise it becomes a maintenance problem for us, doesn't it?
Well, yes, yes, exactly.
But there will be some components that will be ours because we are the only consumer of that component.
Tamara says, why is Amazon on this and not Rackspace? Maybe Tamara works for Rackspace.
I can't answer that one. Oh, so we bursted out to Amazon Cloud in the past using the S3 interface.
It's a historical slide.
Yes.
It shows what you did.
Yes, it's what we did.
That's what it did.
Yeah.
Exactly, of course. Yeah. I could have answered that one, and for once. Look, how do you decide between KVM, Zen, or OpenStack on top of these?
How do we choose the hypervisor?
So
hypervisor choice is going to have to be, in our view, giving everyone different flavours, so different types of hypervisor.
Yeah.
So the idea that underneath you will eventually see KVM in the Ubuntu form, KVM in the Red Hat form, ESX, possibly multiple flavours of ESX out there, and Hyper-V is something that we've got to get our heads around and work to, and there's nothing to stop people building the plugins in OpenStack to do all of them.
Good. Okay, we'll move on because you've got a nice finish, and I want to get to your finish.
Yeah, well, I think we've already talked about this kind of architecture.
Things, yeah.
I think we've made the points here already about that. So perhaps we can move on.
And here we are, the big finish.
The big finish. So how about a different form of compute as well turning up in this world?
I'd like that,
because up until now we've been following the gentle advance of the technology in x86 technology. Moore's law drives us forward, and I call that gentle as well now, because it's sort of it feels we're sort of bedded down. That's normal for us.
Well, that's where you're going back to your slide with the thing. That's sort of like the smooth upward curve.
So there's another disruption out there. And that disruption is starting to use the processors that are used inside cellular phones and similar types of personal devices. They're incredibly powerful processors. They have very, very low power, and because the price of phones go at, they're cheap. So we as a company have been investing in cartridge-based computer developments. We've announced what we call Moonshot. You can see what we were targeting to hit with the program. But we've been introducing these types of cartridge. We introduced some in the fall last year and more this year in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago. And these devices start to ask questions about how you're going to run your workloads on them, because they become to the foundations of a software-defined data center. You can program different types of cartridges, have different types of cartridges, not be locked into a single rigid infrastructure that you have today. And we've got to find out a way to use them and manage them. So the best way that we can think of manage them is to use OpenStack as the interface to that environment. So by making OpenStack work with our other disruptor, now we're playing two disruptions into the data center as we move forward. But the important point is our Moonshot disruption will be taken as part of an OpenStack disruption into that world. So it's less risk.
Why is it so good to have these little things?
Power savings.
Power.
Potentially 85% power savings. And we know many data centers we go to, they're really struggling for the amount of space that they've got in them, limited by the cooling inside those data centers. If you think about the amount of power that these devices are actually consuming over their lifetime, it becomes a significant chunk of cost. We've seen cases where the capital cost of the server is not the most important item, the power is. Then we get lots more density inside those data centers, so better use of our space inside them. We can also drive the costs down a considerable distance because this is naturally a cheaper, easier to build type of environment. We're talking about essentially a single board rather than the more complex structures built in today's servers. So there are real cost advantages in coming into this world as well. And we're going to see this mature very rapidly as we start to see adoption of this technology, and the proof points are going to start to grow in terms of how much you're going to be able to save, in terms of capital cost, power cost, and everything else over the next few months, years.
But be specific, why is OpenStack so good for this?
OpenStack just gives us an interface that the whole community can come to. It's giving us an interface that's not a proprietary one into this world. It is a place where lots of developers, innovators, clever, smart people can come to and access the technology.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, it's keeping options open. I mean, the value of OpenStack in this context is it's an isolation layer. I mean, we talked about hardware abstraction right at the very beginning, and to pull in this and anything else that might come along in the future, which gives you some interesting new options at a physical infrastructure level. It's great. It just isolates you from those kind of decisions.
Richard says if you're going to use this hardware, why don't you use the Open Compute project?
Possible.
Other hardware solutions are available, is basically.
Yes, I think that's a good answer. I couldn't think of one, but other hardware solutions are available. Yes, very good. Thank you.
That's basically it. All right, we've just got 2 minutes to wrap up on this. If anyone here is thinking, I haven't had a go with this yet, but now I'd really like to, first step. So our sandbox is a place to go, but also just go looking at what the OpenStack Foundation is making available. And, if you're a reasonably competent IT guy, you may be able to download it and have a little play for yourself. We've seen examples of youngsters coming in and picking up, don't do that every project, by the way, guys, and possibly don't try to install it on your Raspberry Pi. You may be over-challenging your Raspberry Pi, although... In the future, you put 50,000 Raspberry Pis.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So
Raspberry Pi is a thought. But have a go, have a play, but think more importantly that this is a piece of technology. What we have to understand is what the business importance of it is to enterprises in adopting and using it. And perhaps that's the key discussion that we need to be getting around into everybody's mind, using it in an enterprise situation.
Before I hand over to Dave, one quick, very specific question. Can you migrate, using OpenStack, a virtual workload from one hypervisor to another?
Work in progress. I don't actually know the answer completely myself, so I'm afraid
There's
I have to
an
give that
entire community that will give the answer, and if you can't do it, they'll try and do it themselves.
Yep.
So, yeah. Yeah, that's it. It's not complete. Yeah, thank you very much. It was a special test to see if I could find something so obscure that you would say. Dale, last word on this. What do you think of OpenStack? Are you excited and invigorated by OpenStack, or are you like, yeah, there's a lot of talk about it?
I'm generally fairly so what when it comes to open source. A lot of people are very into open source.
You've not been a big open source
for religious reasons.
Yeah,
and this is different because once an open source project starts to gather momentum and buy-in from the people that actually drive enterprise IT agendas, it starts to really matter. And you don't see that as often as I think you might get the impression of when you go into the evangelist, the land of the evangelist. So this is significant, not because it's open source, but because it's open source with a broad buy-in from the community, both open source and commercial.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, both of you, Colin, Dale. Thank you for that. Thanks for all your questions. We are out of time. There will be this if you want to have a look at it again, so there's a lot of information. Don't forget that this will be available on demand, and you can share it with other people who might have missed it the first time round. Please do for that. And as you can see, there are lots of links, and so if you want to climb into Colin's sandbox, please do. And so... Stop it. So I would just like to say that I've been Tim Phillips in Front of the Register. Goodbye.